Hello, and welcome back to Spin Cycle Live. I'm your host, Nathan Hale. Today, we are back with another great episode for y'all. Today is Thursday, October 23rd, 2025. And boy, do we have a lot to cover today, as always. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We'll be with you for the next half an hour. We have stories on the Pentagon. We have stories on U.S. spending. We have stories on FEMA. FEMA is back in the news again today. Remember that FEMA story that came out like a few months back that showed that the Biden administration was like not helping Republicans? Well, they're back in the news again, and something's actually finally being done about it. Thank goodness. So all that and more today on Spin Cycle Live. Get ready for it all. So we have a lot to talk about today, and I just mainly want to talk about that just right at the top of the bat. We're winning as a country right now. This is what winning feels like. You know, I'm going to talk a little bit about today about what's been happening in the Pentagon. So at the Pentagon, there's been a shakeup with the press briefing room. So basically, the Pentagon issued an order, and you can go and read it online, it's available out there, that basically listed out some demands that the Pentagon wanted for their press staff. And I think for the most part, they were fairly reasonable, but basically, every legacy media outlet flipped out about this. So we have stories to cover with all that, but what's happened is that a whole lot of these independent media outlets have been brought in to the Pentagon now, one of them being the Daily Signal. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what the Daily Signal has written about all of this, since they're going to be becoming a part of the press pool. So let's get into this story. So the Daily Signal is obtaining a Pentagon press credentials. I've covered a lot of Daily Signal stories. I like their writing. I'm happy with their journalism abilities. So I feel like they'll be a good source to be covering the Pentagon. So I'm excited to see more from them. But here's what they had to say. So this is from Rob Louie. There is no greater duty for American journalists than to truthfully inform the public about their government, more especially efforts to keep the homeland safe from national security threats, both foreign and domestic. Many have honored that patriotic obligation with distinction. More than 50 years ago, journalists reporting on the Vietnam War uncovered startling information and revealed government deception. More recently, investigations into wars in Afghanistan and Iraq exposed strategic failures of our leaders. These kinds of stories have challenged the perception of our government and altered the course of American history. Sadly, too many journalists in recent years have abdicated this responsibility. Some reported that President Donald Trump colluded with Russia to influence the results of the 2016 election. Some published anonymous claims that the sitting president called service members suckers and losers, despite mountains of on-the-record evidence to the contrary. Some failed to thoroughly investigate claims of Russian bounties on U.S. troops in Afghanistan. These stories eroded the public's trust in media and jeopardized the credibility of the press. The Department of War recently released updated press guidance for coverage of the Pentagon. These guidelines have sparked a vigorous public debate over whether the new policy upsets the balance between access and accountability, thus compromising core journalistic principles. Some publications have failed on either side of the debate after good faith consideration. Others appear to be deliberately misrepresenting this policy. Despite the protests of some members of the Pentagon press corps, the public deserves truthful reporting on national security. Now is a critical time to do that work. The current administration is seeking the wholesale revitalization of the American military, the restructuring of our defense industrial base, and the emergence of world-challenging military technologies. Meanwhile, America is engaging in military action against Venezuela and drug traffickers, an uneasy ceasefire holds in the Middle East, and the pursuit of peace between Russia and Ukrainian countries. So, Daily Signal is going to be covering it. There's a few other outlets that I want to talk about real quick. So, this article that the Hill put together covers some of the outlets that are going to be showing up in the White House press room. So some of these include, so the Pentagon has declined to release a full list of all the press that's going to be coming into the Pentagon right now. So we don't really know. But I assume it'll look a little similar to how the current White House press briefing room looks, just in the Pentagon. So the Pentagon declined to release a list of the new media outlets to the Hill, but posts to social media on Wednesday indicate that the additional journalists work across far-right websites such as Human Events, its sister company, Canadian website, The Post Millennial, the National Pulse, The Gateway Pundit, and Lindell TV, started by MyPillow CEO and President Trump ally Mike Lindell. They will join the likes of One American News Network, The Federalist, and Epoch Times, I think that's how it's pronounced, a handful of foreign outlets and freelancers and independent journalists who already had a press badge, though only One American News regularly reports from the building. Every major television network, wire, publication, and radio outlet reporter, including for the conservative Fox News, Newsmax, The Washington Times, The Washington Examiner, and The Daily Caller, refused to sign the Pentagon policy. So depending on how you feel about those news outlets, you might have a different opinion on this. So overall, what I'm hearing is, the major news networks, they didn't sign the new policy. Well, in my opinion, I don't think they're major news networks anymore. What are we seeing now? The thing that separated major news networks from all of our little independent alternative media folks was two things: viewership and access, right? Viewership, we have in the bag. Look at how the Daily Wire is doing. Look at how One American News is doing. Look at how all of these alternative news outlets are doing with viewership. It's far higher than a lot of the mainstream news outlets out there. And that's not necessarily because it's just television views. But, so for example, the Ben Shapiro Show, for example. It's a podcast you can listen to. You can also watch on YouTube. You can watch on a whole bunch of different platforms. If you combine all those views together, it's far more than anything that CNN is doing right now. The Joe Rogan Show is frequently ranked the #1 podcast in the country or in the world, right? And not that Joe Rogan is necessarily a right-wing news personality, but he's certainly a part of the alternative media crowd, right? And he's doing far better than so many of these mainstream news outlets are doing, right? So #1, so we got in the bag, right? Us on the right, we have viewership in the bag. We got it down, right? There's far more people watching us than there are on the left. They've relegated themselves to social media and their echo chambers. So what's the other thing? Access, right? Access is the second thing. Well, what do we see under the Trump administration? We see alternative media in the White House press briefing room, and now in the Pentagon, and in other places. We see them expanding their networks out to journalists across the country, right? They have contributors all over the country now. So no longer is alternative media playing catch up using networks like Fox and CNN and MSNBC as primary sources. They are now the primary source. They are the ones who are asking Caroline Leavitt at the White House press briefings questions. They are the ones reporting on the ground what's actually going on. We've won in the media war. The war is over. The body is in the ground. It is dead, right? I don't believe that mainstream media, televised media on cable networks will ever come back to the level that it once was, even 5 years ago. I think it's all moved online. I think it's all moved to shows like this that people trust more, right? Lots of people watch this show, right? I gave you my opinion on what's happening, right? I'm not getting paid by anyone. This is my thoughts, my opinions on what's going on in the United States at this exact moment right now as I'm reading this, right? Versus if you go and watch Fox, you go and watch CNN, if you go and watch any of these other shows, one, they're getting paid to do this, which is not a bad thing, but what it does mean is that that money's coming from somewhere. And it's either coming from advertisers or donors or any other sources. And they are dictating to those networks what they want said, what they don't want said, right? So Megyn Kelly, she spoke, and I was listening to her talk, and she said that I believe there was things that she wanted to be critical of within the pharmaceutical industry when she was on Fox, right? But because Pfizer and a lot of these pharmaceutical industries donated to Fox, they would not allow her to cover those stories on her show. But now that she's her own thing, she's her own voice, she's her own brand, she can say whatever she wants on her show, right? That's why people trust her. Because they know she's telling the truth. Why would she lie? She's not getting paid by anyone. She's not advocating for anyone other than herself and for what she believes is correct. So I think it's great that we're seeing more and more of these alternative media outlets inside these actual briefing rooms being able to ask questions. Because we trust them more. Because they're not getting paid by these huge, massive companies and these huge, massive conglomerates to push propaganda and just BS garbage down our throats. This is a massive win. And I truly don't think that enough people are appreciating how truly big of a deal this is that these media outlets are in the Pentagon briefing room now. And they're in the White House briefing room. They're there right now. They're there today. It just blows my mind. So, you know, I like to talk about things on this show that I don't think are getting enough coverage or, you know, aren't getting talked about enough or I think are a lot bigger deal than a lot of people think they are. This is a big deal because this is what I felt for years watching Daily Wire shows, watching One America News, watching, you know, any of these other, you know, reading the Post Millennial, all of these sites is, you know, they don't have the access, right? They can only work with the information that I can work with, right? We're all working with publicly available information based on what primary sources like CNN and the AP and stuff have covered in these briefing rooms. And now they can do it themselves, right? So now they can be the number one, they can be their own bubble of information. They have it fully locked down into how they're writing articles, how they're producing content. And I think it's amazing, and I love it, and I think we should give a big round of applause for these media outlets who have fought for years to get to this point. Glad to see it. All right, so let's move on. So the government is still shut down. We were just talking about, you know, covering the government. It's still shut down. So Democrats blocked the funding bill for the 12th time after marathon floor protests. The 12th time that they've kept the government shut down. Whoa. My Hale website's acting up. All right. So Senate Democrats voted Wednesday for a 12th time to block a House bill passed to reopen the government and keep it funded through November 21st. Democrats blocked the funding measure, a clean continuing resolution that would prolong Biden-era funding levels. Even a left-leaning outlet like The Hill can admit that this is a clean, continuous resolution after liberal Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon spoke on the Senate floor for nearly 23 hours to protest President Trump's first 9 months in office. 23 hours. I thought that these senators were old AF. How are they staying up for 23 hours? Isn't this an old guy? He looks kind of older from this picture. It might be an old picture. I don't know. I don't know how this guy stayed for 23 hours. I'm 21. I don't think I could stay up for 23 hours talking on the Senate floor. I don't think I could do it. Democrat colleagues applauded Merkley's show of defiance before the vote on the Republican drafted funding bill. His act of defiance on this. Yes, he's this big, strong character. My gosh. The bill failed to advance by a vote of 54 to 46. It needed 60 votes to move forward. Only 3 members of the Democrat caucus voted to reopen the government. Senators Catherine Cortez Masto from Nevada, John Fetterman from PA, the most reasonable Democrat that there is right now, the only one, and Senator Angus King of Maine, an independent who caucuses with the Democrats. Senator Rand Paul was the lone Republican to oppose the measure. Democrats who blocked the House-passed bill say they won't fund the government until Trump and the Republican leaders in Congress negotiate over the expiration of enhanced health insurance subsidies, GOP enacted cuts to Medicare, and the administration's move to claw back previously approved funding. Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Speaker Mike Johnson have repeatedly rebuffed Democrats' demands to negotiate healthcare spending levels while federal departments and agencies remain shuttered. The repeated failure of the House passed funding bill to move in the Senate has House Republicans discussing the possibility of passing a funding short gap that would last until December 2026. Even if Democrats suddenly reverse course and vote for the pending House funding measure, it would only keep the government funded until the Friday before Thanksgiving. That's my birthday. Friday before Thanksgiving, the 21st. House Ways and Means Committee Chair Jason Smith told Bloomberg TV Wednesday that the House could pass a new continuing resolution lasting until December 1st, 2026. Thune told reporters Tuesday that the likelihood of passing the regular annual appropriations bill in 2025 is shrinking by the day as the shutdown drags on. Quote, "I think the longer these guys drag this out, the harder it will become to see a path to do it the old-fashioned way," he said. He said the passing of regular appropriations bills under regular order is clearly the preferred method of outcome. So, I just think it's so entirely laughable that Democrats are constantly calling this the Republican shutdown, when Republicans have time and time again, for a 12th time, voted to keep the government open, right? How much of an echo chamber do you have to be in? Or how stuck on stupid do you have to be to see that this is not a Republican shutdown? This is, in fact, a Democrat shutdown, and they are keeping the government closed on purpose to get credit. And the fact that this is a clean appropriation, so what do we say? This is what, 2020 level spending? Where did it say it? I know it said somewhere. Oh, I'm missing it. But it's Biden era spending. I know that. Was it 2021 maybe? I don't remember what it said. I'm not going to read back through the whole thing and try and find it for you. We're live on the air, folks. So, this is spending that has been approved already, right? This isn't any changes to spending that's happening. This is a clean resolution. It's not pork packed into it. And the fact that Democrats are trying to play with the American people and trying to get their radical agenda passed when we have hundreds of thousands of workers in this country who have been furloughed and who are not getting paid right now because the Democrats are keeping the government shut down is insane, right? You would do more by opening the government back up and coming to the negotiation table. And, I think what would be more powerful right now is for Democrats to say to Republicans, hey, by the way, we're well past this. They should have done this the first time that this resolution came to the Senate. We're on the 12th time. I think they've lost negotiating power at this point. I think it's just time for us to wait it out. But if I was leader of the Democrats and I could go to the Republicans and say, hey, you guys don't have a majority of the Senate because you're going to need 60 votes to get this thing passed. We will vote to keep the government open, but there's a few things we want. And they are reasonable things. They are not giving illegals health care. They are not doing these radical things that they want to be done. Have some actual reasonable things that you want to have in the government. And say, hey, we won't stand in your way. We'll make this nice and smooth of a process for you all. But we want X, Y, and Z. Great. Done. If they would try to be reasonable, we could actually work with them. But Democrats are showing time and time again that they're actually not reasonable. They're actually the opposite of reasonable. They're not reasonable at all. And that will be shown in this very last article that I'll be talking about today. But first, I want to talk about a little bit more about spending. So, U.S. hits $38 trillion in debt after the fastest accumulation of $1 trillion outside of the pandemic. In the midst of a federal government shutdown, the U.S. government's gross national debt surpassed $38 trillion on Wednesday, a record number that highlights the accelerating accumulation of debt on America's balance sheet. It's also the fastest accumulation of $1 trillion in debt outside of the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. hit $37 trillion in gross national debt in August this year. The $38 trillion update is found in the latest Treasury Department report, which logs the nation's daily finances. The Government Accountability Office outlines some of the impacts of rising government debt on Americans, including higher borrowing costs for things like mortgages and cars, lower wages from businesses having less money available to invest, and more expensive goods and services. So, not good things. The Trump administration says its policies are helping to slow government spending and will shrink the nation's massive deficit. A new analysis by Treasury Department officials states that from April to September, the cumulative deficit totaled $468 billion. In a post on X on Wednesday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that's the lowest reading since 2019. Quote, during his first 8 months in office, President Trump has reduced the deficit by $350 billion compared to the same period in 2024 by cutting spending and boosting revenue. White House spokesperson Kush Dashi said in a statement, adding that the administration would purse reboost economic growth, lower inflation, tariff revenue, lower borrowing costs, and cuts to waste, fraud, and abuse. The Joint Economic Committee estimates that the total national debt has grown by $69,000 per second for the past year. $70,000 per second. Boom, 70,000. Boom, 70,000. Boom, 70,000. Can you imagine that's people's salaries in a year? That's the median household income for the United States in a second. Going away in a second. Every single second, someone's salary gone, right? I mean, obviously it's not someone's actual salary being gone, but that equivalent in actual spending gone. It's crazy. Michael Peterson, chair and CEO of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, what a name, the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, said in a statement that reaching $38 trillion in debt during a government shutdown is the latest troubling sign that lawmakers are not meeting their basic fiscal duties. Along with increased debt, you get higher interest costs, which are now the fastest growing part of the budget. Peterson added, we spent $4 trillion on interest over the last decade, and we'll spend $14 trillion in the next 10 years. Interest costs crowd our important public and private investments in our future, harming the economy for every American. The U.S. hit $34 trillion in debt in January 2024, $35 trillion in July 2024, and $36 in November of 2024. So we're adding like $3 trillion in debt year after year after year. It's crazy. So the administration wants to talk all about how they're bringing all this money from tariff revenues and they bring in like $800 billion, $800 million in tariff revenues, 800 billion, something like that. I thought it was 800 something. Maybe it was $800 billion in tariff revenues, something along those lines. So I just want to show you the breakdown of federal spending. Now, this is from 2021. This is the 2021 revenue versus expenditures in billions of dollars in the government. So the government brought in around $4 trillion in revenue in 2021, but we spent $6.8 trillion, right? So we overdrafted our accounts. This is the issue. This is the issue that we're facing, is that we have all this expense that is bankrupting us. And I love to hear that we're cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, that we're cutting a lot of these smaller departments, blah, blah, blah. That's pennies. That's pennies compared to what we're actually spending money on. Our biggest expenditure, income security, Social Security, health care, Medicare, national defense, and net interest. We spent $352 billion in 2021 just paying our interest. That we spent all corporate income taxes in this country on just paying our interest. That money did not go to help Americans. That money did not go to help fund actual programs. That money went to pay interest. It's just gone. It's gone. It's into the ether. It disappears. It's gone. It's gone. Right? That interest is gone. It doesn't help anyone. So I say time and time again, do not be fooled by the Republicans when they say that they are cutting funding, and you hear them cutting funding in these smaller little departments. Cutting the Department of Education right there, that would be great. I would love to see the Department of Education is completely dissolved and not have any more money spent on federal education in this country. I think it should just be a states issue. Sounds great, right? We can cut things like that. But a lot of these spending cuts are happening way down here. See these little EB lines? Little EB lines. They're happening in these smaller departments, not where the actual big money is at. And yes, we found some waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security, in Medicare, in these places. But it was next to nothing. It was a lot of money, but when it really comes down to it, was it really that much when we consider income security, $1.649 trillion. 1/4 of our revenue went to this single thing alone. So do not be fooled when you hear Republicans saying that they are cutting spending or they are trying to save money or they're finding waste, fraud, and abuse. Until you start hearing them cutting funding or finding ways to revitalize these programs that are actually bankrupting us, Social Security, income security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of these, until you hear them going after those programs and saying this is how we're going to revamp them to save money and not be in the debt, we will perpetually be in debt. Because you'll notice it's these 4 programs, and national defense, we spend a lot of money on national defense, but for good reason. We subsidize the rest of the world's national defense for them. Canada has next to no national defense because we subsidize their national defense for them, because they know that if someone were to attack Canada, we would go and help them because they're our northern neighbors to the north, right? We're buddies. Same thing with Europe. Europe is able to spend all this money on their social safety nets and their free healthcare and everything because they spend nothing on national defense. Well, they do spend some money on national defense, but not in comparison to the United States. They also don't have a lot of these other programs the United States spends money on. We spend money on a whole lot of things that a lot of other countries don't spend money on. So until you hear a good strategy to actually reform Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, our entitlement programs, we will always be in debt. It's a fact. We're always going to be in debt. It's only going to get worse and worse and worse until we can figure out what to do with these, right? Because if you notice, we could cut everything under our national defense right here. We could even cut national defense and throw and switch Medicare. They're not that much different. We could switch the two of them. We could cut every single government program in this country except for income security, Social Security, healthcare, and Medicare and Medicaid. Cut national defense, commerce, education, general government, all of these, and we would still be going into debt. We would still be in a deficit, right? So the numbers just don't line up. So I don't want you to get fooled when you see things like this, right? That this is all great. I want to see money saved wherever it can be. But I'm not sold until you tell me you're going after these bigger programs. And I'm interested to see what's going to happen, because someday there's going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back. And we're going to get screwed unless we can figure out how to deal with these things. That's all I got to say about that. Let's go and move on. Got one last story to cover today. So from the Daily Wire, not isolated. Bombshell DHS probe reveals widespread political weaponization of Biden's FEMA. So you remember in FEMA, remember when that big hurricane went through Appalachia and FEMA was discriminating, giving aid to certain houses. They had a Trump sign in their front lawn. Yeah, this is probably one of the things that honestly got Trump elected, if we're being perfectly honest. So finally, something's being done about this. So a bombshell report released Tuesday by the Department of Homeland Security revealed that FEMA's targeting of Trump supporters was not an isolated incident, contradicting testimony by former President Joe Biden's FEMA chief. Of course it does. They're all liars. The DHS Privacy Office said that an investigation into FEMA found that the agency has been tracking the political beliefs of conservative disaster survivors since at least September 2021. The probe was launched by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in response to a Daily Wire report exposing a FEMA employee for instructing her team to avoid homes advertising Trump in the aftermath of Hurricane Milton. Those instructions, given by a FEMA employee named Marnie Washington, who was fired after the Daily Wire report, told relief workers canvassing Lake Placid, Florida, to skip the homes of people with Trump yard signs or flags. In response to this report, Deanne Criswell, who led FEMA under Biden, claimed that the incident was isolated and did not reflect the agency's standard practices. Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't reflect the agency's standard practices. That would be really bad if it did. However, this political weaponization was not isolated, the DHS report found, saying that it had, quote, uncovered evidence that this also occurred during other disasters across the nation. Oh, great! So it's even worse than we thought it was before. So we really thought it was just a couple of incidences in like Florida and North Carolina and stuff. Turns out it's far worse than we thought it was. It always is. So since Hurricane Ida, in September 2021, FEMA employees have made notes about the political beliefs of disaster survivors, like, quote, angry political rant, or, quote, sign states I'm a bitter gun owner clinging to my religion, or, quote, homeowner had a sign stating this is Trump country, and, quote, pro-gun signage. Other notes left in the FEMA system include statements like, quote, there was a political flyer, so I didn't leave FEMA brochure, and, quote, a lot of explicit political flags, posters, etc., quote, F Joe Biden, quote, MAGA 2024, quote, Joe Biden sucks, quote, Trump 2024. We do not recommend anyone visiting these locations. So here's a map. So this is figure 2. So examples of FEMA political information collection in various states in disaster 2021 through 2024. So you can see here, so in Texas there was a pro-gun sign and address. In Indiana, a sign states I'm a bitter gun owner clinging to my religion. Okay. In Kentucky, quote, angry political rant in Kentucky. In Pennsylvania, quote, a lot of explicit posters, blah, blah, we read through those. North Carolina, the survivor had a sign that read NRA, we do our part. North Carolina, again, survivor stated that homes have been damaged, but there are Republicans on the grounds with guns, so please be careful. 3 reports from Florida, one of them, Trump signed no contact per leadership. Another one, survivor very anti-government, anti-Biden, told me to tell Biden to go F himself. Honestly fair, right? If you are being discriminated against by FEMA under Joe Biden, I would tell Joe Biden to go F himself too. It's insane. So the federal government was withholding aid against Americans in crisis based upon their political beliefs. This should horrify every American regardless of political persuasion, said DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. For years, FEMA employees under the Biden administration intentionally delayed much-needed aid to Americans suffering from natural disasters on purely political grounds. DHS said Noem had referenced the incident in Lake Placid to the Department of Justice for further investigation and potential prosecution. The DHS report found that FEMA violated the Privacy Act of 1974 by collecting and storing records tied to protected speech. The investigation exposed widespread gaps in FEMA's policies, processes, and procedures, resulting in systemic violations that unfairly targeted individuals across the country, the report said. The DHS Privacy Office examined screenshots of the tool that FEMA canvassers used to collect information from disaster survivors and data extracted from the tool's databases, the report said. The tool's information indicated that canvassers, including information related to political party affiliation, campaign signs, and other information related to freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Since September 2021, FEMA employees and contractors flagged things like gun signage 72 times, Trump 15 times, firearms 5 times, political 3 times, and Biden and NRA twice, respectively. Here's a nice graph in this article if you'd like to look at more. Other examples of things logged into FEMA's tracking system were noted like angry political rant, quote, sign states I'm a bitter gun owner clinging to my religion, homeowner had a sign stating this is Trump country. These findings were all part of the investigation Noem launched into FEMA in response to Washington's guidance in Florida. The report cites the Daily Wire, noting that it was, quote, the first news outlet to report these allegations. The findings appear to contradict FEMA Administrator Chris Wells' November 19th testimony to the House Oversight Committee. Quote, we are working with the Inspector General to determine whether or not this is broader than this. But the evidence that I have seen so far shows that this was not an isolated incident, and it has not gone beyond what this one employee did. The Florida incident promoted actions from dozens of elected officials and investigators from the state of Tennessee and state of Florida. The House Homeland Security Committee and House Oversight Committee on Internal FEMA Investigation, America First Legal, and Department of Homeland Security Inspector General, and the Office of Special Counsel. It was also referenced in an executive order from Trump ordering FEMA to be dramatically reformed. We should all be worried about this as Americans, because we are all Americans when disasters happen, right? We all bleed the same color. We're all the same on the inside. So when a disaster happens, we expect agencies like FEMA to support our needs in rebuilding after a natural disaster. This is an instance where having strong government actually makes a lot of sense. Having a federal agency that helps with disaster management and cleanup makes a ton of sense. I'm happy that we have this. I'm usually not a pro big government person. I'm pro having big FEMA. Big fan of it, right? Because we do have disasters in this country, and they're devastating to people. People lose money, people lose their homes, people lose their stuff, right? People lose so much capital when their home is destroyed or damaged from a storm, right? And it's not their fault that they lived in the path of the storm, especially if you were these people who lived in North Carolina, for example, in the inland of North Carolina. You didn't expect a hurricane to go over your house and bulldoze it, right? We never expected hurricanes to make it all the way that far north. So the fact that there was discrimination happening against people who supported Trump just because of their political beliefs, it's disgusting, frankly. It really is. And you know, you could make the argument that this was not a widespread directive from FEMA, and I'm not entirely convinced that, you know, the people who headed up FEMA were sitting in their offices like, hey, you know, we really shouldn't be giving aid to Trump supporters. It very likely, I said this when the initial story happened, it could have been bad apples in the field. Because we know that there are a ton of bleeding heart liberals who will go and work for agencies like FEMA, who will go and do this on-the-ground work because it makes them feel good. And they're crazy. They could be crazy people. There's a lot of crazy people in the world. So this very well could be a bunch of crazy people. You know, when it really comes down to what, there was a total of 52, 57 incidences of these things, maybe 60 or 70 in total between 2021, 2024, I think it might have been, that they were showing. So when it really comes down to it, not that many. They're very likely, of all the people who go and do work with FEMA, there could have been 60 or 70 people out there who are just absolutely crazy insane and would do something like that. Now, the bigger question is, why wasn't this flagged by FEMA headquarters? Why wasn't this seen by upper management? Why wasn't this seen by supervisors or supervisor on top of that, right? Why did it take a Daily Wire news report to get this into the mainstream? That's really the bigger question that we should be asking ourselves here is, and it could very likely be that maybe the people who run FEMA might not necessarily told their contractors, their employees to go out and discriminate, but if they knew it was happening, maybe they kept their mouths shut about it and were like, you know, it's just a few Trump supporters, and it's not a big deal, right? They could have kept their mouths shut about it, which is equally as bad as not saying anything at all. So I'm glad to see that this being reported to the DOJ and that hopefully some prosecution happens because of this. Because justice should be brought to these people who were discriminated against for having a political yard sign in front of their house, for being in Trump country, because this area, it is Trump country. He won North Carolina. He won Georgia. He won South Carolina. He won all these states in here. This is Trump country inside of here. That sign's accurate. So it's just disgusting to me, and I am glad to see that some good is finally coming out of this, and we're having this all brought to light. So with that, folks, that is the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I know that I did. We'll be back here on Tuesday with yet another episode rounding out October as a month. Can you believe that October is already almost over? It's kind of crazy. I mean, we're sitting here, it's October 23rd. We have one more week of October left, then we're in Halloween, then we're in November, then we got my birthday on November 21st. Very excited about my birthday, folks. Very excited. I'm going to be 22 years old. 22. We'll be another 10 years until I'm the same digit over again. So it's very exciting. Last time this happened was when I turned 11. So I'm excited. 2-2. So we got that. We got Thanksgiving. We got Christmas. We got so much fun and joy and festivities coming up to round out the first year of the Trump administration. So excited to see. So excited to see all of this. I can't believe it. But with that, thank you so much for watching. We'll be back here on Tuesday with yet another episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you're following. All of our social media is linked in the description down below. It's been scrolling across the screen this whole time. Share this show with friends. I did an interview that is up on YouTube. I will link it in the description down below. You can also scroll back through my feed a little bit and go and find that interview if you want to watch it. Yeah, it was a great interview that I did. Highly enjoyed it. Please go and show some support for all of that. And with that, I have been Nathan Hale. This has been Spin Cycle Live. I will see you back here on Tuesday, same time, same place, 6 p.m. With that, peace out.